Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar, Navigating Online Safety and Sexual Development. My name is Lewis Allen and I'm the Acting Project Lead for the Children and Technology Facilitated Abuse Project at eSafety. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung and Bunurong people of the Kulin Nations, who are the traditional owners of the lands in Melbourne, where I'm speaking to you from, as are all of our panelists today. I also pay my respects to the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to lands and waters. We pay our respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and to elders past and present, and extend a particular welcome to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. Now, before we dive into our discussion, we do have a few little housekeeping matters to go over. So firstly, there will be live captions available for the webinar. And if you require those, please follow the link that'll be supplied in the chat. There will be a live Q&A at the end, so if you could please send any questions via the questions box in your GoToWebinar dashboard. We'll aim to get to as many of those as we can during the webinar, but if we don't get to your question, the panelists will be taking some time afterwards offline to record an extended Q&A. So this is a little bit like your extended special features on your DVD. This will be recorded and will be made available alongside the live webinar, and that'll be available in about 2 weeks on the aifs website. And you can find that in the aifs newsletter or under the webinar banner. There will be related readings and resources also available, and those have been supplied by the panelists. So they'll be in the handout section of the GoToWebinar control panel. It is a big topic today, so we won't be able to capture everything we could possibly talk about. I'm sure this webinar, the time is going to go by really quickly. There will be a short feedback survey at the end, so we do ask that you'll take a few moments to fill that in if you feel so inclined. And as one final note, the webinar will include discussion of the sexual development of children and young people in the context of online safety, and that may include discussion of sensitive topics such as child sexual abuse online, grooming, and harmful sexual behaviours. So please take care while listening, and if you think you benefit from some support, there are some resources also available in the chat. But we are here today to talk about eSafety's recently released online safety and sexual development guidance. Now, this is a robust document and it's designed for people who advise and support families to refer to around issues of online safety and how they impact children's development in areas such as sexual literacy and respectful relationships. The resource draws on a great existing evidence base on children's sexual development, but it extends that work by applying an online safety lens. eSafety collaborated with a range of experts in developing the resource, and we are very fortunate to have a few of them with us here today. The presenters' full bios are online, so I'll just do a quick round of intros at this time. And first off, we have Anne Atchison, who is the manager of the Schools, Community and Disability team at Sexual Health Victoria.
Thanks, Lewis. Thanks for having me.
And we also have Deanne Carson, who is the founding CEO of Body Safety Australia.
Thanks, Lewis. Lovely to be here.
And we have Derek McCormack, who is the director of the Raising Children Network.
Thanks, Lewis, and hello all. Great to be here.
And joining me here at the eSafety office, we have Gulsum Addis, who is the manager of the Children, Youth and Families team.
Thanks, Lewis. Hi, everyone.
Thank you all. So now that you know who we are, without further ado, I will hand over to Gulsum for the next little bit to tell us more about the online safety and sexual development guidance. What is it? How was it developed? And who is it for?
Wonderful. Thanks, Lewis. Hi again, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. So before we dive in, I just want to say how lucky we are to have such an incredible panel with us. The expertise and insight that everyone will bring today to this conversation is valuable. So today we're focused on online safety and sexual development guidance developed by my team here at the eSafety Commissioner of a broader suite of family capacity building tools aimed at sexual abuse online and supporting healthy sexual development in children and young people. These resources are all available on eSafety's website. This is a part of a broader project in which eSafety was funded by the Commonwealth Government to deliver targeted education for parents and carers, particularly those with priority needs, to prevent, recognise and respond to and report harmful behaviours online, with a specific focus on issues related to child sexual abuse and child sexual exploitation online. Through sharing this resource with those who work with and support children and families, we hope to expand knowledge and reach. Now, the question is, why did we need to create this here at eSafety? And the answer is simple. Because the way children grow up today is fundamentally different. From infancy, children are engaging with digital devices. They're learning, playing, and socializing online. And while the internet offers incredible opportunities, it also exposes children to risks, sometimes well before they're developmentally ready to understand or process what they're seeing. We know that through our research and our reporting arms here at eSafety, that children and young people are encountering sexualized content, harmful stereotypes, and sometimes even grooming or coercion online from a very young age. We also know that many parents, carers, and frontline workers are unsure on how to respond. They want to support children's development, but they're often left asking, what's normal? What's concerning? And how do I talk about this in a way that's age appropriate and safe? So that's exactly what this guidance is designed to help with. It's a developmental continuum that maps out what healthy sexual development can look like from birth to 18 years. It outlines what behaviours are typical at each stage, what might require further investigation or intervention, and what kind of conversations, activities, and supports can help children and young people develop safely and confidently, both online and offline. So this work, as Lewis mentioned, was developed from a robust evidence base that already existed around child development, but through the expertise available at eSafety and our partners, it adds an online safety lens to that knowledge. There has been relatively little research on how growing up in a digital world impacts children's development and understanding around sex and relationships. And the need to contextualise and understand this from an online safety perspective is exactly why eSafety is working in this space. What we've produced is quite a dense and very rich resource. So let me be clear, this isn't a document that you're expected to read from cover to cover. It's a reference tool, something you can turn to when a tricky situation comes up, when you're not sure how to respond, or when a parent or young person asks a question that catches you off guard. And hopefully today's session will help demystify it, simplify it, and give you the confidence to use this tool in your daily work. Now, who is this resource for? It was designed with a wide and diverse audience in mind. That includes frontline workers in child protection, education, health, youth services, and community organisations. So people who are supporting families every day and need clear evidence-based guidance. Professionals working with priority cohorts, including families of children with disability, First Nations families, LGBTQIA+ young families, young people and their families, culturally and linguistically diverse families too, including those from migrant and refugee backgrounds. The resource is also available for parents to peruse, but we understand that these conversations and issues have nuance, and our parents and carers are so time poor. So we've used this information in this guidance to draw out a more simplified guide for parents where we've developed 2 additional documents that are available on the eSafety's website, one for use with 0 to 12-year-olds and the second for use with 12 to 18-year-olds. So back to the general developmental continuum. It's inclusive, trauma-informed and strengths-based. It recognises that development is shaped by culture, community and context, and that no 2 children are the same. What really sets this resource apart is how it was developed. So from the outset, eSafety committed to a deep and inclusive co-design process. This wasn't just about writing a document. It was about listening, learning, and building something that would genuinely meet the needs of diverse families and professionals. The foundation of this guidance draws heavily on the work of Jenny Walsh, whose publication Talk Soon, Talk Often has been a cornerstone of sexuality education in Australia. These insights have helped shape the tone and structure of the developmental continuum, ensuring it's practical, respectful, and grounded in real-world conversations. Beyond that, eSafety has engaged in extensive consultation with over a dozen organisations, some of whom are on your screen and we're lucky enough to hear from today. In developing the continuum, my team also conducted user testing, targeted research, and a full-day co-design workshop that brought together experts in child development, child protection, sexuality, education, and online safety. So whether you're joining us today as a social worker, a psychologist, a teacher, a nurse, a parent, or a carer, or anyone supporting children, young people, and their families, this guidance is for you. It's about building capacity. It's about early intervention, and ultimately it's about keeping children safe online while supporting their right to grow, explore and thrive. Thanks, Lewis.
Thank you, Gulsum. We shall continue with the discussion, moving into really discussing the nuts and bolts of the implementation, how you can actually use this in your context. So we'll start off talking about how people in the education sector might use this resource. So I will hand over to Anne.
Thanks, Lewis, and thanks for the introduction of the resource, Gulsum. That was a really helpful overview. It is a really dense document. There's a lot of information in there. I think it's going to be really helpful for educators to use, but yeah, a lot of information. Before I did start and talk about how educators might use this, I sort of wanted to just say thank you to educators. I know there's a lot on their plate, much more than just teaching and learning and being in the classroom and looking after the academic needs of young people. It's really falling to educators to look after the social and emotional needs of young people as well. And that might fall to activities outside of the classroom and outside of the school. So thank you for taking some time to learn more about this resource and find out how you can better support the young people in front of you. I think what the resource does really well is step out a positive framework for healthy sexual development. So as Gulsum said, it's broken down by ages and it steps through what healthy sexual development might be in a really broad sense, and that provides context for educators to work with. Also steps out things that might need investigation or intervention, and I think that's really helpful to have in an Australian context. So really wonderful of eSafety to pull together an Australian resource in this. I know that when teachers and educators and people in schools get asked questions about sexuality and young people being online, it's not usually a positive conversation. It's usually a problem for a teacher to solve. So I think it's really helpful to have that positive framework stepped out, and that might de-escalate some conversations that are already very heightened. I think linking sexual development to sexual behaviour online is really helpful for educators. As far as I know, no other resource has done that. So linking what is usual development for a young person and how they might develop with their experiences online and sexual behaviours online is really helpful. And as Gulsum mentioned, it also provides some advice for parents and carers. So parents and carers might look to teachers to figure out what to do next. Something might have happened. Okay, what can I do at home? How can I follow the conversation at home? What's going to help? So I think those things, providing a positive context and de-escalating what might be a sensitive or heightened situation is very helpful for educators to have. The topics are helpful as well. I really like the section that is about consent and bodies. So it talks about what is usual across from 0 to 18, what sort of questions young people might have, and how parents and carers can follow up with those conversations at home. I think schools can do better in general in linking sexual development to online activity. And those conversations are the same. For young people, it doesn't matter, online or offline. The conversations we have around bodies and relationships and growing up are all the same. They relate to ethics and consent and safety and choice. So whether young people are online or offline, those conversations are the same, but this resource really links them really tightly together. So that's a helpful thing. I'm sure educators might be thinking about where this sits in the curriculum as well. We know there's much greater focus at the moment on online safety in the curriculum. The new Australian curriculum talks about digital literacy as sort of one of those general capabilities that go across all education. It's a fundamental understanding that young people must have, and the digital literacy documents don't just speak to sort of technical literacy of navigating around the internet. They talk about safety and ethics and choice. So there's those same conversations about relationships that weave through all the content that we talk about in relationships and sexuality education. In Victoria, the Victorian curriculum puts digital literacy as a foundational skill. So absolutely essential skills for young people to have so they can be safe and participate in the world and thrive in the world. So they're not separate to any conversation. They must be integrated, and this document helps do that. The other thing I really like about this document, before I hand off to another question, is the focus on children's rights. Children are at the centre of this document, and that was really helpful to draw all the experts together to participate in review of this document. Children are at the centre of this, children's rights. Children have the right to protection, and that's the grown-up's responsibility to do. They also have the right to participation in the online world. They actually can't participate in education without being online. So we have to figure out how to do that safely. And also, we're talking about sexuality education and sexual development. Young people have the right to safe, responsible sexual relationships at a time of their choosing as they develop. So that's at the centre of this document, and really helpful for that positive framework to really come through, and the helpful advice on the way. I don't know if I've talked
Thank you
too
very
much or too little.
Just right, I'm sure. Before we move on in the conversation, was there anything, Deanne or Derek, that you would like to add on that one?
I think Anne did a marvellous job of really encompassing how schools might use this resource and centering the children in that. So no, I don't have anything, Lewis. Thanks.
It'll be my turn next,
No
so I'm
worries at all.
holding.
That is very true, Derek. You are up next. We're going to talk about how this new resource can help parents talk with their children about online safety in developmentally appropriate ways.
Thanks, Lewis, and thank you to my colleagues. Great to be here in such a timely and important conversation around what is a fantastic resource. So to begin with, I'd like to congratulate eSafety's team and all those involved in getting this thing pulled together as a resource and the associated tools. This is quite unique. And also thanks to Gulsum for giving us a flyby, rapid tour of what it is and how it's useful. And I think Anne's points really do kind of blend in with mine. So when I think about parents and our work at Raising Children Network, what we see often in help seeking with parents, but also you professionals will know, many of us are parents ourselves who are then thinking about how what we know professionally affects our life as parents, if we are parents. So whether it's professionals or parents coming to Raising Children Network, there's this commonality, there's this theme that very often comes up, and nobody here will be too surprised by it. And the theme is what I'm seeing what I might expect? Is what I'm seeing typical? We don't use the word normal as much, but is this developmentally expected? And here, within this conversation space, it's as important as any space, whether it's other spaces like mental health, early child development, uh, developmental concerns, and how they might be early indicators of a delay or a disability. The same theme comes up across, and what we are aiming to do in our work and in work like this collab is to try and help answer that question. Is what I'm seeing or what I'm noticing what I might expect? And if I'm not sure, can you help me out with the next step in this conversation or the next step in my help seeking? So I stress that's professionals and parents and those who are both. Now, looking at this work here with the continuum, it's probably a good place to start from is the fact that we know silence and stigma are major contributors to abuse, whether that's online or offline. So what's a huge mitigator or helpful thing around that fact is having constructive and developmentally appropriate conversations. So talking about online safety with children as parents, including harms online and what abuse might look like online, and the range of possible, let's call them hazards or areas of potential harm online, really, really important conversations to have. And any way we can support or scaffold those conversations is a real win. The eSafety Commissioner has offered an analogy around online safety recently, which is we can't fence the ocean. We need to help our young digital citizens learn how to swim and learn how to understand what might be in that ocean being the internet. So when I think about this conversation and harm, we're obviously talking about the things that parents might want to talk to their children about, the rips, the coral, the potential harm to their bodies if they're in that ocean. So the analogy here is how can we talk about potential harms online, including abuse, grooming, and some of the very disturbing things we're seeing around exploitation. These are not easy conversations to have, but luckily this continuum was developed with a range of experts, and they had particular lenses to bring to this, including children with disability, culturally and linguistically diverse communities, LGBTQI+, all these experiences brought to bear on what is a quite complex piece of work, but having a robust conversation about this continuum. What is helpful to describe on a continuum, and what will help parents contextualize their own concerns on a developmental pathway. So those who are watching and listening today and have not yet dived into the continuum, what I would say is take the time that you can, because it is offering a pathway or developmental pathway based scaffolding for conversations, whether you're a parent or a professional. And as Gulsum said, there's those dedicated resources for parents to cut through to some of the key advice, along with the other things that we have on offer from my colleagues here who specialize in this space. So I suppose my main takeaway here is we're very often looking for accessible and even highly engaging tools to help with constructive conversations that are measured and appropriate for the age and stage of a particular young person. On top of that, I'd say that this continuum is a fantastic piece of the puzzle that links to many other important pieces. For example, the broader conversation about digital citizenship and how we develop the literacy that Anne mentioned around safe conversations around what it means to be a good citizen online, and to another theme which Raising Children Network focuses on more broadly, which is families and their relationship with technology. So when we think about these conversations that are facilitated by this continuum, we can think about how do they link to or fit nicely within a family or a carer and child relationship around how do we as people, as multiple people, interact and relate with technology. That's an important theme, and it's touched on in some of the resources that we have attached to this webinar. So those are the main things I would take away from this. I would also recommend that viewers do check out other resources from eSafety, such as the fantastic webinars and the podcast that was done with ABC, I think it was Life Matters, on that broader topic of safety online. But this is a fantastic resource, and I'll just finish again by congratulating those who have managed to filter what is a large and complex conversation into some quite pointed and accessible tools.
Thank you so much, Derek. It's wonderful to hear that support. Before we move on, once again, I will just leave a moment if Anne or Deanne want to add anything on that particular topic.
I really liked what you said, Derek, about shame and stigma and parenting. I think that in our experience, we found that parents since 2020 have felt sort of overwhelmed by how they wind back things. They feel a lot of judgment. There is shame in there for parents. And I love how the tool is strength-based so that, you know, professionals can have that conversations with parents without overlaying more guilt or more shame or more stigma. And I think that really stood out to me and was, you know, a very obvious testament to how deeply that consultation process and co-design process was.
Absolutely, Diane. And Diane, and when it comes to that note of shame, what we've found from research with the Frameworks Institute around how we frame conversations is we've found that it's hugely important to try and frame positive strength-based conversations with families, carers, and children that are centered on what helps children develop, rather than, and I mean exclusively, rather than conversations which are about effective or ineffective or good or bad parenting. There's a lot of shame and stigma attached to parenting in our modern society, and we certainly don't want to add to any of that.
I'll second that, Derek. That's such a great message, and obviously when we're talking to parents and carers, sometimes they wait until either a problem comes up or their child asks, or they've heard of something in the news, so they're waiting for these conversations. I think what the guidance or the framework can do as well is say, hey, this is usual for a young person to be interested in this. Maybe a parent and carer or a school wants to have a conversation about it. So be proactive instead of reactive. I think that's what we would, how we would like to work with schools.
Absolutely. Those opportunistic and proactive, curious and positive conversations, it's a really good way forward. Yeah.
Thanks so much. I'm sure by now some of our audience are wondering, what about younger children? What about supporting them? So I'm going to pass to Deanne, who can talk to us about that.
Thank you. And I love that question. I think when we were discussing it, you're like, and small children, what do we do with small children in this space? And one of the things that I've been really appreciative of is that so often we can become heightened about including conversations of the, you know, children in early childhood that birth to 4 or 5 years old. We can be concerned about speaking to their sexual development or, you know, their relationship development skills. And I really love that we have taken a lot of care, you've taken a lot of care in the design of this tool to be able to support the adults around those children. Particularly at the moment, you know, I think Anne and Derek alluded to this, but particularly at the moment when we know that there's so much focus on early childhood education and the creation of child sexual exploitation material in early childhood education settings. And a lot of people are feeling really heightened, particularly the professionals who work with those children. So many of the educators and teachers that I've spoken to over the last, you know, weeks or month are feeling anxious, overwhelmed. They feel such a great sense of responsibility. They feel overwhelmed about what that responsibility means, where to go for the information if they're seeing sexualized behaviors in children, or talk about what they're doing online. And I think that this tool has come at a really, really timely period to support the educators who care for those children. Online safety discussions are important from the moment that children start interacting with digital technology. We know that 80% of 4-year-olds are online. So the vast majority of very young children in this country are using digital technology in an online space. 30% of them have their own device, so, iPads or other tablets usually. So for that age group, this resource is really welcome. The tool is great for professionals, I think, to guide families in discussions of what is typical and atypical sexual and relational behaviours online. For us, we see, of course, there's such a spectrum of parenting, but I think that the spectrum is most polarized when it comes to how we use technology for this youngest age group. In one cohort of parents, we can see, in preschool, we can see parents who haven't posted a single image of their child on the internet. They have this culture of saying, no, my child won't have any digital footprint until they choose to. And at the other end, we have parents who are co-creating influencer content, mother-child or, parent-child influencer content. And both parents, because they're in online so often, feeling that that is the norm, feeling that that is the majority of people. So guiding families about, conversations around typical or atypical sexual and relational behaviours is a really important thing to do at the time. And what I think about the how we do this using this continuum is it allows practitioners to do it without feeling like there's personal judgment involved. If we can refer to a document that is evidence-based, that is strength-based, that takes the personal out of it, it can really support, what Derek was talking about, which is dismantling the shame, dismantling the embarrassment, and allow us to really work with families in a way that can create more positive outcomes. The other thing that this does is what we see when we work in early childhood education is when a child, under the age of 5 displays atypical sexual behaviours, sexual behaviours that sits outside of the range of what we would normally see. We know that a lot of professionals working with those children, see that as an indication that the child may have been sexually abused in a contact abuse setting. What we often don't see is, particularly for these young children, the understanding that that might mean that the child has been exposed to adult content and may have been exposed to pornography, whether that's inadvertently by, stumbling across it or being shown it by an adult in their lives or an older child in their lives. And so this allows us, by bringing together the entire child's childhood, which is the digital and the physical, and understanding that the child exists in both of those spaces simultaneously. There is no separation of that. We can support everybody in understanding that, sexual behaviours the root cause of those behaviours might come from their online experience, not necessarily their physical environment experience. And the reason why that is important is because obviously we need the child to have the most appropriate support. So if we can identify, what is underpinning those behaviours, we can support the child in the way that they deserve. The other thing that I really like about this resource, and something that I could talk about all day, is that it's such an advocate for children's digital autonomy by discussing consent for photo taking and video sharing at such an early age. And again, within the context of what we're discussing in early childhood education with, CCTV or digital documentation where we upload photos of children playing, it's such an important conversation for us to have nuance around that. And there's a real, again, strength-based approach to it, because the conversation can come about from, if you are videoing in a family member who may be overseas or who may be at work, asking the child's consent. So the tools that we have for having those conversations, the examples, are really practical and based in real life experiences of the families that you might be working with. What else do I have to say on this? I guess the final thing is that the continuum provides advice for parents and carers on how they can support children's supervised use and how they can co-play. And it speaks to their developmental needs, and I guess what I'm saying is being able to observe your child or observe a child and see what they're doing in an online space, see what kind of developmental need they're having met, so that you can then have discussions about meeting those needs both online and in the physical environment, instead of just saying, get off the iPad. It's actually giving you a tool to say, well, this is the developmental need, so how can we do this in a physical space? And then from a practical aspect, what we see, and I'm sure Derek, you would agree, we see so many parents who are overwhelmed by what steps they take to have these conversations with their children, that they have this heavy reliance on parental controls on the device, and they only work for so long before children learn how to bypass them, or the tech that they're using update their terms and conditions, and all of a sudden the parental tools fall out. And so this is a really practical way for parents to be supported in how they have conversations, age appropriate conversations with their children, how they enter into their child's online experience and reflect back perhaps family values around relationships, sex, sexuality, gender norms, in a way that sort of builds those foundations. Thank you.
Thank you, Deanne. You really covered a lot of ground for us there. So fantastic to hear. And before we go on to our next topics, again, and Derek, anything you'd like to add on the subject of younger children?
I thought that was a fantastic deep dive from Deanne. And the two things that really resonate with me are that autonomy, and it really, really means a lot as children develop and as they develop in diverse ways. And for a lot of young children and young adults, that autonomy is incredibly important. I love the idea that this resource kind of comes from that perspective of, being big fans of consent and having that be talked about at an early age. And the other thing that I was going to turn onto later on, but it already been covered by Deanne, is the idea that parents can, with scaffolding and support like this, can feel a little less risk averse, a little less prone to controls, a little more open to, what's actually happening with the digital tech, what's it serving, and how can we have that developmental need addressed on and offline. So it's about the what's happening rather than what is the tool. Important conversations along with risk and harm conversations.
I totally agree, Dan. I think that's so important to recognise that the tech doesn't cause an interest in sexual development. The sexual development will happen anyway, but young people now have this different tool to be able to access different types of information. So it's not the interest that is broken or the tool that is wrong. We just have to understand how that works and support young people to use that in the best way they can. And the Child Safe Standards talks about providing environments in which young people are able to disclose as well. So if they've never talked about bodies, if they've never talked about consent, if they know they can't talk about sex and sexuality, and then they come across it online, they have no help-seeking strategies, or it's cut off to them. So providing support for the help-seeking strategies and the language to be able to seek help when they need it is so important. And parents and carers are modelling that all the time. and hopefully supported by the school environment as well.
I agree
Thank you so
100%.
much.
And I think, sorry, Lewis, particularly at this early age, you know, if we can have the parents connect into that help seeking now and be that person now when the child is older and perhaps experiencing something, you know, much larger or curious about something much larger, they can fall back on the trust that's developed in this early age. So agree completely, Anne. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And it's a literacy building, and parents do feel overwhelmed in this topic, but also in many topics. And I think the opportunity here is to start early with regular conversations that are age appropriate. You know, you don't start a 14-year-old conversation with a 5-year-old, but you are entering conversation that's right for your child and for their stage, that is just setting the scene, and it can be done bit by bit. You're opening the door, and then things, with the help of tools like this, the conversation just becomes more sophisticated. But it has started early. I love that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We have been having plenty of questions coming through, which is fantastic. We love a curious audience. And just looking at the questions we're receiving here, a lot of them are around using the tool in different contexts. And one that's been coming up a little bit is around practitioners who work with children with disability or who are having developmental delays. So I think that's a good one for us to cover now, how the tool can support practitioners or parents working with children with disability. And maybe we'll go with Deanne to start with.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I was just thinking about, you know, all of the different ways that that can happen. Look, I think one of the things that we know is that that you know, when we're sitting in a space that is kind of anti-tech, it really disadvantages children and young people with a disability or who are neurodivergent. And I think that we need to, you know, put very squarely in this conversation that, uh, you know, that technology is a communication aid. So many children and young people rely on technology for a number of different reasons in order to communicate, you know, in their worlds. It's a way that a lot of people, young children, young people regulate their emotions. It's a way for them to connect with their peers independently. It's a way for them to engage in creativity. So I think that's a really important question of how we use this tool so that we allow children with a disability to maintain all of the positives that they get from the use of technology. Um, it can be used, absolutely. It doesn't speak to disabilities specifically, but it does speak to ages and stages. So you don't have to use the tool in a way that is prescriptive and go to, you know, this child is this age, but you can go to the area of interest and look at where the child is at and what their interest is in using it, and use the tool and locate sort of the child's development where they're currently sitting. I am also aware that eSafety is currently developing resources to more specifically address the needs of families and children with a disability as well.
Thanks, Deanne. I just raised my hand to add that, but you've covered that. We are currently in the scoping phase of making sure that this continuum is adapted to those families with those needs. So we are continuing to evolve and adapt the work that's already been done to make sure that it is speaking specifically to those families as well. Thank you.
And I was just going to add in to echo that point around developmental age and stage. There's a reason we use those terms, because children do develop, including those with a delay in development and with disability. Children of all kinds do develop at different rates and in different ways. So that's connected to this broader conversation about autonomy and having communication as a right and a facilitate for children with different needs. So the continuum as it is right now does help those identify where their child is as a stage developmentally and work to that. And then it's fantastic to hear that the more disability-focused resources are on the way. It can't be overstated how important it is for children with different needs and complex needs to have their right to express, connect, play, socialize using real world environments and online environments. All this alongside the important conversation about safety, regulation, and avoiding harm as parents and as institutions and as tech platforms, which is a big topic at the moment. Yeah.
I was going to try and paraphrase the expert that I work with who works in the sexuality education with young people with cognitive disability, and her mantra is age appropriate information delivered in a developmentally appropriate way. So young people with cognitive disability have a right to this information along with their neurotypical peers. We just got to find out how to talk about it, and specifically sex and sexuality is left off the conversation with young people with cognitive disability for fear that they won't understand it, and that puts them more at risk. So it's a very vulnerable population, and it's a really, really important conversation to have with all young people.
Okay, thank you so much for going through that one. Obviously, we're getting a lot of different questions, and there are a whole range of things that we can address. And again, we will be recording some extra responses after the live webinar. But I think it's really important that we acknowledge that technology is constantly changing, evolving, adapting. And it's probably worth having a bit of a discussion around how the resource can be applied to new and emerging technologies, for example, generative artificial intelligence. And I believe, Derek, you may have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm glad we get to touch on this, and I'm sure it's bubbling up in the questions. So new tech, and it seems like it's moving faster than ever at the moment, but it can seem that way at any time in history. I'll just say that. But new technologies can introduce new and novel risks. It's true. For example, AI, and connected with AI and generative AI, we have companion chatbots, which is quite nicely covered in some resources by eSafety, but it's a big conversation at the moment, and people who are developing dependence, emotional dependence, and being introduced to potential harm and sexual harm through content that is not appropriate for children, and that content or that experience being facilitated by chatbots, companion chatbots, is quite a serious issue. However, the risks and the harms can be mitigated again through approaches that this tool encourages. Regular online safety conversations. It might seem a little bit trite to say, but it is backed by the research that whatever the tech is, and tech does and will continue to change, the protective factors can generally be the same. Is there an open and safe and curious conversation happening around that tech? Is there a relationship between the carer or professional and the child that is about that tech? How are we using it? What's coming up for us? What's upsetting us? If that is the case, then we don't need to focus so much or as much on the new developing tech, but we can keep our focus on the both protective factors, positive and curious conversations that are developmentally and age appropriate. So that's sort of my main take on that. I mean, we are learning a lot, it seems, every week about the ways in which new and developing tech like AI may bring harms. And there's a fantastic podcast on this called Flesh and Code, which is about adult users of companion AIs. And it's a cautionary tale, to be honest. And it really does speak to some of the regulatory problems around companion AIs. But whatever the new AI is, whatever the new thing that follows this generation of AI is, I think it's best to focus our efforts on the protective factors and what we are teaching our children to do while swimming in that ocean. Yeah.
So important, Derek. Absolutely agree. If we focus on the protective factors, I know parents and carers get frustrated because they're working to the best of their technical ability already, and then something new comes up and they don't understand it, so it seems scary. But if we're focusing on the messages of consent, understanding your own body, being able to talk about your own body, being able to seek help when you need to, how do ethics apply to this new technology? How does consent apply to the new technology? They're the conversations that parents and carers can have because they're the experts in
Exactly.
human relationships.
Exactly. So you know how we have, hopefully we're having a conversation that's always evolving, that about safety, how I feel safe and when I feel less safe. And then we just superimpose that on what the newest toy is.
I agree. And the other aspect that Anne touched on is ethics. And I think, you know, the continuum actually talks to that. We're doing a lot of research work at the moment around AI generated image-based abuse, which we weren't doing when we were, you know, consulted on the development of the resource. But I can see how it would apply because it takes that ethics-based approach. You know, it's not is sharing a nude legal or illegal. It's is it the right thing to do to share whatever the new technology allows you to do, imagine, and it's there, an image of somebody that they might find to be uh, you know, disturbing for them to have shared in the world, whether that's of them naked or without their hijab or whatever it might be. And the framework allows you to, you know, take that strength-based approach, look at the protective factors, and then add your values alignment. So, and also if you're working with children, like older children and teens, ask them about their values alignment and use the tool to match that up with behavior. So I think that it is adaptable as part of that sort of tech literacy as technologies change.
Great. Thanks so much, Deanne, and great that you brought up the values side of things as well. We have had a question come in around navigating the content for faith-based schools, which is probably too big of a question to address in the final 4 minutes we have, but I think we can talk about that more in our follow-up that will go out with the webinar recording, how we looked at different cultural and faith backgrounds as we developed the continuum. So yes, if we didn't get to your question this time around, we will come back to those and you'll be able to see that in the coming weeks. But I think for now, that's probably about all we have time for. I'm sure many of you have 2 o'clock meetings or bookings or classes that you need to get to. So I would like to give a very warm thank you to our presenters today, Anne, Deanne, Gulsum, Derek. You've all shed so much light on the continuum and how it can be used amongst various contexts, both professionally and in the family. Thank you so much to our audience. We had a huge attendance today, and we're to be sharing this resource with you all and hope that it can be extremely useful to you in your work now and in years to come. And I very much want to thank and acknowledge the efforts of the Australian Institute for Family Studies, particularly the communications team and the Child and Family Evidence and Evaluation team, who have been working tirelessly on the tech behind the scenes, as well as in conversation with us over many, many weeks to make this all happen today. And we really appreciate all the support and guidance going into this. To be notified about the recording, please subscribe to AIF's newsletters. We also had a question about when we might be able to talk about releasing those disability resources that are on the way. The best way to find out about that is to subscribe to the eSafety newsletter for child and family sector professionals, which you can do via the QR code, which is on screen now. Or simply go to eSafety.gov.au/subscribe. and you can be kept up to date on all sorts of resources that we're developing for the sector. And of course, once you log off from the webinar, we do hope that you'll participate in the feedback survey. It doesn't take very long, but it's very helpful to everyone concerned to make these bigger and better events for you all. But for now, thank you so much once again for joining us. We hope that you'll come along to many more aifs webinars and perhaps some eSafety ones as well. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon. And welcome back to our eSafety webinar on online safety and sexual development guidance. We're now in the extended Q&A session where we'll address a few more of the questions that came through during the live webinar that we didn't have time to address in the moment. A lot of what came through to us was around a bit more practical exploration of the tool and how it might be used across some different contexts. So we're going to start off with the tool on screen, as you can see, and I'll hand over to Gulsum to kick us off.
Thanks, Lewis. Yeah, I think a really good place to start if you are time poor is scroll over to page 11 on the continuum, and you see there it's listed that we have kind of set out the continuum we've organised it into 4 domains, and those domains there on screen you can see are around culture, social norms and sexuality, bodies, consent and privacy, relationships, and sexual literacy. So each of these domains is covered specifically in relation to online matters, and then it's followed by more general themes relating to the domain, and they are also split up into age groups. So you've got the 0 to 4 years, 5 to 7 years, 8 to 12 years, 13 to 15 years, and 16 to 18 years. So we would recommend that either based on the issue or the topic, you can go to the domain area that you're interested in, or if you'd like to understand a little bit more about what's age and stage appropriate for particular child or family that you're working with, you could also go to the age, the column as well. And I'd like to open it up to other members of the panel to potentially discuss where or how they might see the practical application and navigation of this of the table here as well in their day-to-day work.
I'm happy to comment first. I think the fact that the continuum goes with that, if you like, pincer approach, you can go with a domain or age or both at the same time, I think makes a lot of sense, and it makes it quite quick to get into it. And then, of course, there's an awful lot of other contextual information available in the documentation, but it's a good place to start. No surprises, it kind of is familiar to us at Raising Children Network. When we offer information to parents, it's usually age-based, and then within that, domain-based. Of course, with online content, people may also just come to something like this because they're searching or they're rifling through with search terms in mind or questions, and that would work well here as well. But I think the structure of it makes a lot of sense, and I'm thinking of parents perhaps jumping into relationships as a domain and thinking about how is my child going with relationships, and the fact that my child is now entering school, because these age brackets do nicely overlay onto pretty important transition times in life and transition points. So as a scenario, I can imagine a parent jumping in to a school-age child, 5 and upwards, and thinking about relationships so they can start that conversation about new friends, feeling safe with new friends in a school setting, and then thinking about what's happening online at the same time, the digital space as well as the real world space. So there's a lot in there, and I'm sure people are squinting as they lean in to look at that, but that might be a scenario I can imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll extend on that, Derek. I think an educator, a really common scenario is that they have a child or a group of children or young people engaged in sharing images or accessing sexual images, or something's happened for that cohort, I think it's going to be really helpful for an educator to look at the age group that those young people fit in, and also maybe look either side and go, actually, this behaviour fits more into the bracket for older children, and that might raise some flags for the educator, or actually, this is all pretty usual and expected for this age group. Yeah, in particularly the information around overall sexual development, that's going to be helpful to read the rest of the framework, and also the part on bodies and consent, and sexual literacy. So yeah, there's a lot of information there, and it also provides that parental guidance. Here's a backup you could talk to parents and carers about. And it's also evidenced, so there's research links in there as well. So that's really going to be really helpful for educators.
I think you've covered a lot of it, but I'll jump in and say, when it says may, it then also adds the context of that child within their peer group as well. So, as we were scrolling through, I was thinking about all of the children who will be saying, oh, but so-and-so lets us, or at this school they're allowed to, or in this club they're allowed to, or everybody does. And having access to a tool like this can show sort of the breadth of what peers may or may not be doing without it being prescriptive of what children should or shouldn't be doing. And there is space there for the conversations around values or norms. So you can use this tool from a cultural perspective as well to sort of interrogate where do the values or norms or faith or whatever it might be sit within the broader societal context too.
I think it's a great point, Deanne, because when it comes to culture and norms and the many kind of lenses that come on into a family or community conversation, faith-based, community-based, interest-based, the values that are attached to those conversations can obviously come to play when discussing things like, when do we feel safe? In what scenarios are we expressing our values online? In what ways are we connecting with others online around our values or our community or our extended community? Because that's what online allows you to do. So there's a real good, strong connection between what a family or community talks about as their important values and a continuum like this scaffolding a pretty important conversation around online safety.
I'll just add to that, Derek. I think it's helpful to point out that this is an Australian context. So this might be extra sort of beneficial for people working in communities of refugee and migrants who might not be familiar with the Australian landscape and the Australian culture, and might be quite different to the cultural expectations of young people at home or of their country of origin. So I think having that Australian context and reading it as such as well is going to be helpful for educators.
I think it's also worth emphasising something that you mentioned, and which was that the continuum doesn't just talk about what children may do or experience, but also has a section at each point around parent and carer activities and interactions. So whether you're a practitioner who's supporting a family, you can actually point out two things that parents and carers can do. There are kind of calls to action in that sense. So it's not just about absorbing information about children and development. It's got the so what as well.
Probably the most important part, Lewis, the so what and what do we do next, and identify, understand, and respond. So if we've identified it's either an issue or it's not, what's our context and how do we respond the best way we can? I think we're trying to do that all the time, whether we're a parent or an educator.
So you're actually muted there, Derek.
Thank you, Lewis. you could have let me go on and on, but the point is really well made, and there's other work going on outside this continuum, at a state level in different states, and at a federal level, national level, about problematic and harmful sexual behavior more generally, and there's a number of authorities working on that and how we respond to problematic and harmful sexualized behavior, and that work is really, really important around helping services and those who are working with children and carers in the future respond and do the next step. What we have here is a really fantastic early resource that scaffolds a conversation and then offers some very clear guidance about what you might do next. And we hear that all the time. What should I be looking for, and what would I do next? And this is, in that sense, this is a real front runner, because it's quite hard to get the other work completed quickly.
Right. We had questions coming through about different contexts calling out. I think we've taken quite a journey around the continuum. Just wondering if anyone had any additional sort of contexts or perspectives they'd like to highlight or bring into play on this.
I would just like to wish everyone good luck. You know, these are both really tricky topics. Talking about sexuality with young people is difficult. Trying to understand technology is really difficult. This document tries to bring those things together. So, yeah, good luck to all the educators and the parents and carers and people that work with young people on pulling all this information and trying to get the best outcomes for the young people.
I totally agree, and on top of wishing everybody luck in getting this brought into their day-to-day, I would suggest socializing it by looking through it, or spending a bit of time, putting a bit of time aside to look through this and road test it with their colleagues, with other parents, with trusted and other connections they have, to socialize this not just by themselves, and give it that kind of road test, because then it might feel much more tangible and ready to use.
I think I would just add, I would love to, I'd love to hear back about how it impacts people's practice. I don't know if that's possible at all, but I can really see that this is a tool that in so many spaces it can have real practical application, and bringing those, two things together, the sexual development and the technology in practice, can be really powerful, I think, to sort of feedback. So if there's an opportunity to hear back at all, I'd love that.
I think I'm in hearty agreement with that. We always welcome feedback on the advice and resources that eSafety puts out into the world, and yeah, we'd love to hear stories of how they're being used in practice. I think at that point we can close things off. Thank you once again to our panelists for providing your wisdom, your thoughts. It's been so good talking with you about this work, and having worked with you throughout all our co-design to get it to the point where it is being shared with the world. Really proud to have had this session with you. Once again, would like to thank our audience who joined us and who have come back to watch these extended questions, and thank you once again to aifs for giving us the chance to do this and keeping this all online.